In this video, I would like to talk about the bench and angle grinders that we have down here in the metal shop. What you see behind me here are our bench grinders. We have two of them. We have this bench grinder, they're both bolted to the floor, by the way, which is nice. This bench grinder has a wire brush on one side for finishing, and then a standard grinding wheel on the other. And then this bench grinder over here has two grinding wheels, and one of them has this little flip down plexiglass safety guide. That's good if you're doing something real quick, but I recommend, no matter what, even if you're using that guide, use face protection, because this is going to throw a lot of sparks. Now, what these are for is finishing the end of a small piece of stock. So, for instance, in a separate video, I cut some stock on the iron worker. So I have this piece of angle iron, and it has a little sharp bit, it has some burrs from being welded on before, one side isn't quite square. I could finish all this up on the bench grinder here and have a smoother angle, take all the sharp edges off, and I could even square it up if I really wanted to. Same with the round stock here. Now, I wouldn't work with anything much smaller than this, because these bench grinders can be dangerous and you wouldn't want your workpiece to get pulled into them. I'll show you the angle grinder in a few minutes, and that's a better way to work on something a little bit smaller. If it gets too small, much smaller than this, you would just want to start hand filing it. Now, the same as the bench top belt sander, these roll towards you. Also same as the lathe. So that means when you're angling your workpiece, you want to angle it up, or at least flat. If you angle it down, which sometimes you need to, make sure that it doesn't get drawn in between the rest and the grinding stone, or particularly the wire brush. It's going to want to pull it in there, and so you have to be careful not to let that happen. It can stall out the tool, or you could get hurt. These do throw sparks. You can see there's sort of a black carbon stain on the wall behind them. That's from the sparks hitting it. They're safe. They're not going to hurt you as long as you have eye protection. It's not going to catch you on fire or anything like that. So they're nothing to be afraid of. They're just a little bit loud, and they throw some sparks around. I'll show you. The on-off switch for these are both clearly labeled. They're right on the front. Notice how I'm using the tool rest and I'm setting my workpiece on it. I'm not doing it up here where it can pull it out of my grip. And if I wanted to clean that up, I could use the wire brush. Look how much shinier that end is that I wire brushed. You also have to be careful because these spin for a long time. If you didn't notice that, you could get hurt. That wire brush, if you touched it with bare skin, would really hurt you. When you're working with any of these sorts of grinders, you're going to want to wear eye protection. I just recommend a face shield. They're hanging right here on the wall, and you could wear goggles, but you're still going to get sparks hitting your face, and that can be uncomfortable. Also, anytime you grind metal, it throws off a lot of carbon, which is like this black dust, and it'll get all over everything. So you might want to wear old clothes if you're going to do metalworking. There's some smocks down here that you can put on. Now, these face shields have a ratcheting tightener loosener in the back. Some of them you have to pull out. This one you just turn it. These are always dirty, so you can kind of blow them off, or even if you want to go rinse them in the sink, don't scrub them, because whatever's on there is abrasive, and so it's just going to make the shield part blurry. And don't ever set them down like this on the shield. Hang them up or set them down like this on the table so that the shield doesn't get all scratched up. Now, I don't like the way that these feel on my forehead, and I have a lot of forehead to deal with, so I made my mask for COVID here with a hood. So that's the kind of shop nerd. It's the kind of shop nerd that I am. How about that? Now I'm ready. You also are going to want to wear gloves. I don't think these tools are terribly loud, but if they seem loud to you when you start using them, there is also ear protection right here on the wall. Obviously, the bench grinder isn't going to be the right tool for everything. It's great for small handheld pieces, but if you have something that's larger and awkward to hold up to the bench grinder, or if you're trying to change the finish on a piece of plate steel, you're going to want to use what's called an angle grinder. Now, these come in different sizes. We only have these small 5-inch angle grinders here. Maybe it's a 4-inch. Says 4.5-inch angle grinder. I was close. So they make a 6-inch angle grinder, and it's a big monster thing, and it's scary. We don't have one. I'm kind of glad of it. They're used more in auto body and in large metal work. Now, we have 3 different kinds of these. The Dewalt one is the newest one and the nicest one, and you will notice that it has a safety mechanism on the trigger, which is sort of nice. It means that you can't accidentally bump it and turn it on, or at least it's more difficult to. But there is this little button here, part of the lever, and you actually have to pull that down. See that? You have to pull that down before you can depress this paddle, like this. Now, some other features of this. It has this handle so that you can use it two-handed, which I'll demonstrate in a minute. If you are more comfortable the other way, that handle just unscrews and you can easily drop it on the floor or screw it into the other side. You can also use these without, but I don't recommend it. I recommend having that on one side or the other. A few other features of this angle grinder that are very useful. One, it has this guard on it, this silver guard. That's to keep you from bumping your hand against the grinding wheel. Believe me, I have a very nasty scar from accidentally doing this. So please do not do that. Now, you can adjust this, and it is possible that somebody might have adjusted it and you might come to find that that guard is swiveled in one direction, sort of in a funny place, right? Might even be completely wrong. That would be pointless. Then you would cut your hand on that. So you want that guard to be on the bottom where your hand is. Now, there is a little lever just inside, right here. See it right there. I'll do a close-up of it. And that lever is how you can change the rotation of the guard. Sometimes you might be working in a certain position where you don't want the sparks to be being thrown one direction, so you might want to change that guard around sometimes. But always keep it on the bottom half of the disc, and always make sure that it is protecting your hands where you're holding the tool. Now right now, this angle grinder has a standard grinding disc on it. It's about close to 1/4 inch thick. It's this abrasive material. It's the same material that you'll find on the abrasive saw, which I'll do in a different video. This is great for grinding things. There is a thinner version of this that's a cutting wheel, and you can use that for cutting things off. We have so many other ways to cut in here that it is probably rare that you'll need the cutting wheel. On these angle grinders, you can also install a sanding pad, which is also sometimes called a flap disc. It's like a bunch of little pieces of sandpaper that overlap, and the direction that it goes, it will put a different finish on. These are great. This one's kind of beat, but it probably still works. So I'll try to demonstrate that. And then you can also add a wire brush cup. This is great for the final finish. This will give you a really nice finish. And it's the same as the wire brush on the bench grinder. There's different kinds. This one is a little looser, so this is a good last finish. This one's a little tougher. If you wanted to take paint or rust off of something, I would start with this and move to that. Now, one thing to know about these wire brush cups, those bristles come flying off of this thing very regularly. They will stick in your clothes. They will stick in your skin. So this is of all the times to wear a smock, welding and using the angle grinder, very, very important. And make sure when you're using a wire brush cup that you use protective clothing and obviously a face shield and gloves. Now, the guard on the Dewalt is thick enough that if you set it down, nothing would happen. It would not touch the table. But some of the other angle grinders are not so thick, and if you install a flap disc or a wire brush and you set it down, that thing that's spinning, the disc or the brush, is going to touch the table. And what will happen is if it's still spinning and you lay it on the table, it's going to scoot across the table. So we have this nice magnetic tool rest. And what that's for is to set your angle grinder on it while you're working. When you're done or you have to move something around, you can set it down there. It's just a rest. It's very handy. You can move it around in the shop. If you're not back here in the welding booth, but you're out at one of the other metal tables and you're using one of the angle grinders, if no one else is using it, grab it, put it to use. It has a magnet on the bottom. It's nice and sturdy. So I've got a piece of plate steel here in the vise that's pretty grubby and covered in some old welding and junk and paint. And I'm going to clean this up in a video and show you what it looks like to use the angle grinders. It's a very useful tool. It's very versatile. I'll also show you how to change the discs on them. Okay, so I have my face shield on, I have my gloves on, and I have my workpiece securely clamped into the vise here. I've got my rest at an arm's length so that I can reach and grab it. I'm comfortable with the side of the grinder that the handle is on. I know how to operate the trigger. I've got enough plug. I'm ready to go. Now the last thing I'm going to do is check to see which way my sparks fly. That's not so bad. No one's in the shop, so it's not a big deal. However, I do want to make sure I don't throw sparks at the phone. If someone else was in here, I may turn this table, I may pull this table out from the wall and turn it a little bit so that the sparks were flying in a direction that was not where someone was working. So you can see that makes pretty quick work of the paint and rust and residue that's on that plate. A couple things to note. First of all, it's hot. Grinding metal makes it hot. Second of all, if I was going to be doing a lot of this, I would want to wear ear protection because it's very loud. And I would probably turn on the vent fan. All right, so now I want to show you how to use the sanding disc. Now, this grinder is a little bit different. I'll unwrap the cord so you can see it. It has just a regular switch, on and off. And there's not a whole lot to it, right? Actually, there is a safety guard. You have to push down on the back and then push up. So if you just push up like that, it won't work. You have to push that little paddle up and then do it. And again, two different sides. Now, all of these have a little notch in the spindle, and there's a break. See that? That is how you take this off. So what you need is this wrench, and the spokes of the wrench fit into those holes. Now this is an adjustable one, so I have to adjust it to fit. And then I've got the little brake depressed on the back, and this will come right off. Once I do that, I can unscrew it, and it comes right off. Now you'll notice that this piece has a little notch on it, and that's to catch the center of the wheel. Some angle grinders, this will come off, and you want to make sure it's on the right way round to catch that. All right? And the part that goes back over it should have the flat side down to clamp it in place there. Let's switch the sandpaper disc over to the Dewalt here, since I have it plugged in. Now I would unplug this to change Even though there's the safety, I wouldn't want it to start up while I was changing the disc. Get that in there. This is similar to changing the sandpaper in the palm sanders. So I need both of those little pins to fit inside that hoop, and then holding the button on the back. I can loosen that. Now, put the sandpaper on, and then while still holding the brake on the back, tighten up with the wrench again. Okay, ready to go. Plug it back in. Now, let's see what the sanding flap disc does. Now that's getting a nice polish now. You can see the marks where the grinder dug into the metal and it leaves that sort of striated mark. Now the sanding disc has really gone by and made it nice and smooth and shiny. You can still see some imperfections in the steel, but it's a lot prettier. Now the last thing we would do is use the wire brush cup. We might even go from one to the other. Now you'll notice difference between the grinding wheels and sanding wheels and the wire brush cup, which is, rather than just having an open hole that's smooth there, they are threaded. They have a threaded, and that thread matches this, or it should. So, in this case, you can remove that spacer right there. You can take that right off, and you can thread, since you have the thickness of that nut in the back, you put that to the back, and you can thread it right on there. So again, I'm holding the brake, and I just spin it right on there until it's nice and tight. And now it's ready to go. A finer finish yet. I think they would call this a wire wheel. Now I can take that off. The nice thing about these is you don't need a wrench. Now when this starts to spin, that brush will flare out, and any bristle that's loose will come flying. So I'm glad I'm wearing my apron and gloves, and I've got a full face shield on. On this plate, you don't see much difference from the wire wheel to the wire brush cup, but on other instances you would. So now you can see we've got a really shiny finish on this piece of metal. So it started out looking like that, pretty beat. And now we've gotten it to a pretty beautiful finish. If I wanted to finish this even more, I could use a piece of very fine grit sandpaper, say 400 to 800 grit sandpaper. That's the sandpaper that's black and kind of feels like an emery board, and you use that with water, and you would just fine sand it with your wet sand it. And then of course, since it's steel, you'll need to finish this. So if you wanted to preserve this finish on something you made, you would need to clear coat it with some clear lacquer. I usually would use spray lacquer. You can also put linseed oil on steel, but it doesn't last, and you have to do it over and over again. Butcher's wax is another way that some people finish steel. So that's the angle grinders and the bench grinders. One thing that I want to reiterate from the safety videos, and it's particularly of importance when you're using these tools. Since these tools have a thing on the end that spins really fast, you have to make sure that all loose clothing, necklaces, bracelets, anything that hangs off your body is put away. Because what's going to happen is if it grabs your shirt tail, before you know it, the angle grinder is going to tear all the buttons off your shirt. It's going to be up under your arm. It's going to just eat your shirt up with you in it. And if you're using, depending on what you're using, you could get really hurt if that happens. So make sure that you're wearing a smock or an apron, your shirt tails are tucked in, you don't have any lanyards or long necklaces or earrings hanging off of you. Use eye protection, use gloves, and ear protection if it seems loud. When you're done using the angle grinders, please, like all tools, wrap the cord up loosely around the body of the tool, tuck in the end, and then hang it up on its little set of hooks there. If you have used the wrench or any spare grinding wheels that are loose, they go back in this closet too. And then, if no one else is using them, you can go ahead and close the doors.